My guest today is a licensed clinical social worker who has been in private practice for nearly 3 decades. And she's held a love for nature since childhood. And in 2021, she became certified as a nature and forest therapy guide. She now takes busy urbanites in the Chicago area out to natural areas to help them reconnect with nature as a means of self care, improved health, and awareness of our environment. Welcome to the show, Elise Reiner. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Tanya. This is an honor to be able to talk about forest bathing, forest therapy. hmm
Lovely. Well, I'm excited to hear more about it and learn all about how that unfolded. You've shared with me that you've had a love for nature since you were a little girl, and you lived in a small forested lakeside community and ended up moving to Chicago. How old were you when you had to move to Chicago?
I was 7 at that time, and that community stayed in my heart all of these years.
Yeah. How was that change for you?
It was very difficult because this was a place where I lived 2 blocks from the Indiana Dunes. It was on the border of Indiana and Michigan, and you could walk right over to the lake, climb the dunes. There's dune grass. Behind where I lived, there was forested area, no sidewalks. It was just,
Mm.
it felt very free and freeing. And leaving that, even though we only went just around the bottom part of Lake Michigan to Chicago, it was a world of difference as it
Mm.
turned into much more urban setting.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, so it was a big loss, but I think at 7 years old, I couldn't express that. But somewhere in my heart, nature kept calling me.
Yeah. So how were you able at all to keep that connection when you lived in the city or in the urban area there?
Fortunately, again, my family had moved very close to Lake Michigan. So there were a lot of parks, very large parks near where I lived, and we could walk to the beach.
Mm.
So I was able to have that, but something was still missing for me.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a dramatically different lifestyle and a dramatically different pace, isn't it, too?
Yes,
That I
yes.
would imagine would even be very noticeable for a child,
Mhm.
especially with how schools function in urban settings and all of that.
Yeah, there was a difference. I left the country. And you don't think about country being maybe a little over an hour, almost 2 hours away from Chicago,
Right.
but there's a lot of it around. And leaving that to come to the city was a big contrast.
Hmm. And you're still there. You're still in the city environment. Is that true?
I am. I live in Evanston, so I'm just across the northernmost border of Chicago, and I
Hmm.
live blocks from Lake Michigan.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
So I still walk over there.
Wonderful. Well, are there, besides walking over to Lake Michigan, are there any specific ways in which you engage with nature and keep that connection alive for yourself?
Well, walking has been one way when I'm in this city environment. And then I would take vacations, and vacations would be to beautiful places. And my beautiful places were places filled with forest and where I could hike, sit quietly by a stream, things like that. So I've gone for many, many years to the Southwest and also many, many times to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, that's
Favorite
what.
places. Mhm.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, and hiking. I relate to that. I'm in Oregon. I'm a recent transplant to Oregon. But
Yeah.
yeah, if I could turn my camera around, it would make everybody nauseous right now. But I live in the middle of a forest right now, and
Mhm.
I'm looking out, and everything is green and leaves all around me. So I'm feeling quite blessed with that environment. And yeah, I totally relate to the hiking. That's been a wonderful experience for me too. I've noticed at a certain point that all my vacations were away from people into nature.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you are taking people on forest bathing walks. How did it come to that? How did you find out about it? And yeah, what made you want to help other people with that?
I had never heard of that, but I had talked to a friend probably for over 10 years with a dream that I had. And I always said, I just want to take a group of women out to the forest and sit around in a circle and do I don't know what, but I just felt it in my heart that I wanted to take groups of people into forested areas to slow down and just reconnect to themselves. So I'm a therapist and I have a private practice, and I was sitting with a client who happened to just bring up the topic one day and say, "Gee, I think I want to do a forest therapy training, and it's at the Morton Arboretum, which is in the Chicago area, about an hour from where I am." And she said, "It's 7 days long, and I might sign up." Well, when I heard that, I just almost jumped out of my seat, but I controlled myself and looked it up and thought, it's next week. I cannot just cancel everybody to go run off and train to be a forest therapy guide. So I just kind of put it aside and got on the newsletter for the Association of Nature and Forest Therapists. And during the pandemic, it must have been sometime in the spring of the pandemic, I think it was, a newsletter came out and said, we've learned to do this online.
Mm,
There was no question
fascinating.
from me. I thought, I didn't care about how are they going to do this online. I just thought, I can do it. I can do it. So I signed up, and I was able, through 6 months of Zooms, thank goodness for Zoom, for this and something like that.
Mhm.
We did 6 months of Zoom, and then once you get certified, you meet in person for 4 days. And we did that as well. And I took people on walks in person and would come back to my class and talk about the walk experience. And I learned to do virtual walks as well, that you can send people out with their cell phone and everybody can have a forest bathing experience without me being present, except through Zoom on their phone.
That's amazing. I mean, just the thought of having a forest bathing experience through Zoom. It's not something I would have ever thought of, but I guess the pandemic really helped us be a little more creative in many different ways, right? And I think it was also a time where a lot of people really reoriented and took stock of what's important. And it seems like something surfaced for you that was really important because you've always already had that connection.
Did. And I do think that during the pandemic, there was this part of people that felt drawn
Hmm.
to get out to nature
Hmm.
after being, cloistered indoors for a long time. Nature became, I want to say, more popular, but I think it called to us as human beings because it's so healing, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
I definitely resonate with that. I mean, I've always been somebody who's been outside a lot, but especially during the pandemic, that was something I really felt drawn to. And it was fascinating. I lived right next to a park, and unbelievable the amount of people that were all of a sudden taking walks that I had never seen there before, right? And like everybody was out and about and feeling the desire to connect because I think you just mentioned health benefits. Is there something you can speak to a little more about that? What do you say? What do you think how do you think it impacts people when
Well,
they're
there's
out?
actually been studies on it. So, would it be okay if I gave you a little bit of a history of what's called forest bathing or forest
Yes.
therapy? Both words are interchangeable. It came about in Japan, and it came about in the early 1980s. And I'm not surprised that it came from Japan because there they have both the Buddhist religion and I think Shinto religion, which tends to have a lot more nature connection to it. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know that. So it was that connection that may have inspired some of this. But it was in the early 1980s when things in the tech industry started to become more developed. And even though we probably didn't have personal computers in our home till maybe 10 or 15 years later, it was starting to be something through offices and work. It's becoming more popular. So the more that people were staying indoors to do work under fluorescent lighting, with screen type things and other technological devices that were coming quickly,
Mhm.
the more people were becoming sick.
Hmm.
And so the Japanese government noticed this and wondered, they asked the question, why suddenly are there increased rates of cancer? And
Mhm.
why are there increased rates of autoimmune disorders and other things like that? And in stopping to think about it, they asked the question, what would happen to people? Would there be a difference if people went into nature more often? Would that make a difference? And so they started by doing studies on this, and research was conducted. And research showed that time spent amongst trees, nature, whether it's your yard or a forest, had benefits, health benefits to the human body. So, go ahead if you have a question.
No, go ahead. Go finish. Please.
So, one of the ways that this happens is, first of all, this is the first time in the evolution of humanity that human beings are not living in their natural environment. Because up until now, and I don't mean just the 2000s, but this era, people were outdoors much more. People lived outdoors, and they spent time outdoors growing food, hunting, gathering. But today we don't have to do that. And so we have much more of a disconnection from nature today than we ever did before. So when you go out into nature and you spend time around the plants and trees, trees have a way of taking care of themselves and protecting themselves from insects, from fungus, from diseases that might come around. Trees give off, without our realizing it, what's called phytoncides. And phytoncides, they spray it out of them and it protects them from these kinds of things, bugs and diseases and all.
Mhm.
You can smell phytoncides when you go into an evergreen forest, a pine forest. You can smell them. You may not always smell them in different types of settings, but they're still doing that. Because we were made to live amongst the trees, our bodies have an ability to absorb phytoncides. When we absorb them, the phytoncides actually boost our immune system and our natural killer cells, NK cells. Those are the cells that go through and look for the free radicals and help to keep us healthy. So being around nature more helps our bodies to become stronger and heal. So science found that it helped in those ways, but it also found that just being in nature relaxes us. So cortisol levels would go down. People that had depression would have their mood start to lift. Anxiety would get lowered. For some people, creativity gets sparked. So these are some of the research. Heart rate would change to a better pace. So many things just by spending time in nature.
Yeah, what a perfectly set up system. And we and
Yeah,
we
that's a
decided
good
to
way
move
to say
away
it.
from it.
That's a good
Yeah.
way to say it.
Yeah, it's just as you were speaking, I'm like, wow, it's such a it's so and we're so really connected into the system and it helps support us. Why aren't we out there? you know?
Well, that's a really good question. We
Hmm.
do have, if you absolutely can't get out too often, essential oils are actually made from these plants and they have some phytoncides in them. So when you're smelling them or wearing them, you're getting some benefits.
That's interesting. I didn't realize there was, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
You've probably smelled some and said, "Oh, this is so relaxing," because it brings you out there. Hmm.
Yes, yes, it does. It does. Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful system. Yeah, I just kind of can't. That just really sparked something in me, even though I'm like, this is a topic I'm speak about a lot, and not specifically forest bathing, but being out in nature. Like something in how you just said it, like really sparked something in me. So thank you for explaining that so well and what actually happens, and that research has proven what many of us feel anyway when we go out there, right? But to have the scientific sort of proof for that is really helpful sometimes to just know what actually happens and why does it happen and why am I feeling differently when I'm out there.
And we do have some trained forest guides in the Oregon area.
Hmm. I'm sure. That does not surprise me. Yes, that's good to know. Yeah. So when you take people on a walk, how can we picture that? What does that look like? How do you help people connect?
That's a great question because people often think of the walk as we're going to be, walking quickly or we're going to be identifying trees and plants. And sometimes people will say, "Well, I'm not sure I can walk many miles at this point." But a forest bathing walk is nothing like that. It is a very slow process. And most of the time, in 2 or 3 hours, we go less than 1 mile.
Mhm.
So when you're on a walk, you're moving slowly and stopping so that you can notice different things that the guide is now going to invite you to do. We don't call them activities or exercises, we call them invitations because you're invited to do them and there's no right or wrong way to do them. A forest bathing walk is really about experiencing what is around you, the more than human world, through your senses, which means that you're not processing things through your brain. You're processing them through your body, which makes things very different and brings you more into the present moment. So, on a walk, you might be asked or invited to do an invitation for 15 minutes to stop and to wander around and to look at maybe the patterns that you find. What are the smallest patterns? What are the largest patterns? Some things you may want to touch. Some things might have prickles on them or cause you to itch. You may not want to touch. But spending time doing that creates a connection between you and, let's say, you're looking at the veins in a leaf that you never noticed before. After that invitation is finished, we gather in a circle for some deep listening and sharing if people choose to share. One at a time, participants will share what they noticed. And noticing can be what they noticed in the environment, maybe what they noticed from that invitation, maybe the time they spent with that leaf, or they may notice something that they're experiencing within themselves. Because many times going into the forest will allow people to see themselves differently. Being away from, the stories we tell one another or who we have to be in a busy world, free of all that in the forest, you're not being judged out there.
Mhm.
Trees don't care. But sometimes you can notice a tree and notice its strength, or notice its resilience after a fire, or notice, wow, every year it drops its leaves and it makes new ones. And in doing that, there may be a connection somewhere deep inside of, my own resilience, or my own, I can pick up the pieces when they fall down and start again. So there is this reciprocity between humans and the more than human world that sometimes can be demonstrated when there. And again, this can be done in a park. You can walk down your street and notice your neighbor's trees on the parkway. You can go in your backyard, or you can be in a forest or a beach and still have these experiences. So a walk is not just exactly we're walking on the path, but more of we're wandering slowly. And for some people, slowing down is a challenge. We're
I
so
was
used to
just
going
going to ask you
quickly.
about that. Yes, especially if you have a group of people from the city, that must be challenging sometimes. How do they experience that?
Well, people experience it differently. Some people will say, when we're in our circle, this feels so good. I feel like I've just let the weight of the world off my shoulders. And sometimes I'll get somebody that says, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? I'm not doing anything.
Aha,
And
you
that's
do get
okay
that.
too, because everything is welcomed. There's no agenda on a forest bathing walk, no agenda at all. You'll experience whatever you're meant to experience. Some
Mm.
people may decide this isn't for me, and others cannot wait to go back.
Hmm. It sounds like a really beautiful experience for for me it would be
I
anyway.
find it that way.
Yes. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that some people relate to it in a different way and it's ridiculous. And I think that's part of such conditioning where we're so used to having to go, 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 go and do, 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 do all the time, right? And the being is just not as valued in our current sort of society as it's set up right now. And I find that really sad because I think we would be so much more resilient and resourceful if we were able to have that time and had that
Mhm.
be part as a part of our lives in a on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's a really good point because people are just so used to doing that being has become unfamiliar. And I think that is why people practice meditation is to get out of their head and just get in that being place of allowing. So it can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But again, being on a forest therapy walk doesn't mean you have to say a mantra or you have to be clear. Just let your body enjoy. So, one of the things that is done on a forest bathing walk is that instead of thinking about things,
Mm-hmm.
the experiences come by invitations to use different senses. We might be listening to sounds,
Mm-hmm.
we might be smelling certain areas or going to an area that draws you by the scent that you're
Mm-hmm.
picking up. Want to be brave? Maybe we'll be taking off our shoes on a nice day or on a rainy day and feel the mud between your toes. People don't have to do it. That's okay. Maybe they want to put their hand in it. Maybe they want to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But the opportunity is there, and that's why they're invited
Mm-hmm.
to do that. Mhm.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
when you take in through your senses, it's a different type of experience. It's an embodied experience. And it creates usually much more feelings of centeredness, sometimes wholeness, when we get out of this up
Mm-hmm.
here. Mhm. I get
Yeah, it's
relaxed talking about it.
I know. I was thinking that too. I'm like, it's lovely to just sort of be in that state and have a moment to not be in the running and doing a device in our face and always having to be on and connected in the internet sense right now, doing something. So I think this is such a wonderful service you're providing for people. And is it in any way part of what you do with your clients in your therapy sessions as well, or is that a plan for that?
We have more of a plan for that. I would like to create something since I work with women and women who've been in very difficult romantic relationships. Some are divorced or getting divorced, or some are staying in them. But when you're in something like that, you do experience a lot of trauma.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I think down the road, I will create a forest walk for some of the women that I work with, or women who might be struggling with something like that, to rejuvenate them, to help them reconnect to themselves.
Mhm.
Because nature really does help you reconnect to yourself.
So true, so true. Yeah, I would imagine an environment like that when it's a stressful relationship like that would be very much cortisol levels would be high and heart rates
Yeah.
accelerated a good amount. And so yeah, that would be such a wonderful addition.
So, one
Um,
of the fun things about forest therapy walks also is that sometimes when you're just in your body, a childlike feeling can come up.
mhm,
Some people have said, "Oh, I just want to run," or "I just want to throw something." I took a solo walk at one point during my training, and I don't know, I think these were big hazelnut things or something, a black walnut tree. They were all over the path. I picked one up and I rolled it like I was bowling. And then I kept walking along. I picked it up again and more. And I thought, wow, this is kind of fun. And here I was doing this childlike thing
mhm,
that I would not have thought to do.
mhm. So it
And people, mhm.
invites other parts of ourselves to come out and play, literally.
It does. And the exploring too, if you think about a little baby that you put on the lawn, what does the baby do? They sit, they touch the grass with their hands like this, they look at it, they feel it, or they might pick something, or little children will pick a little dandelion and put it under
Mm,
here, feel it. So some invitations we do let you do that, because in the adult world, that's the story we tell ourselves. We have to behave a certain
mhm,
way. Well, you can go out there in the forest on a walk. You don't have to worry whether you're an adult or not. And it doesn't mean you're a child. It just
mhm,
means you're going to explore something that might have been put away years ago.
mhm,
And in exploring it, it's fun and it feels good and it brings parts of yourself back, maybe lost parts of yourself.
mhm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think um the permission to play and to just drop out of what we do on a daily basis and really be is probably a big part of that, the permission and the opportunity, because when we're so in our daily lives, which most of us don't necessarily think about that, right? It's just like, how do I reach my goals? How do I accomplish this? How do I make money? How, like, all the things we're needing to worry about um don't apply when we have that moment of being able to just settle into the environment and engaging with it.
Absolutely. And you know what's so interesting? There is something I say when during one of the invitations where people have had their eyes closed for a while, and then I ask them, open it up as if you're seeing what's in front of you for the very first time, which in itself is an experience.
Mm,
But then I add to that, and what if what you're seeing is also seeing you? Because people forget that we are also nature.
mhm,
There is this one-sided story that we have in our culture that says nature's out there and I'm here.
mhm,
But what would life be like for people to realize I am nature also? And every time you step on that ground or you touch that tree, it knows.
mhm,
And you're having a relationship with it rather than just it's nothing and you're, putting your hand on it.
mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's such a profound point, because if we really truly understood and always remembered that we are nature too and we're part of it, I think a lot of our actions might change dramatically. as a result, as far as sustainability in the world goes, and how we treat natural environments, and clear cutting or other damaging things that are happening to nature, right? If we really truly got that connection and we're really in it, we might not be okay with doing those things.
You raise a good point because if you think about it, and this is just a thought that I have, I'm not saying this is the right answer. Don't we treat things we love better than things we don't have connections to?
Mm.
If we spent more time, would we fall in love with it? Or would we have more connection, appreciation, feeling for it? Might we treat it differently? So
Hmm.
it's not only about we can go into the forest to get healed. Maybe we go into the forest to heal the forest, the earth, the consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah, you spoke about reciprocity earlier, and there's, I'm sure, a million different ways in which that can be expressed. But I think one of them, I read that somewhere, um, is simply acknowledging nature and feeling grateful for all the things, for everything that the plants do and give us and provide. I mean, the health benefits alone of that you mentioned earlier, what an amazing service is that. How wonderful that we have that available whenever we choose, and to feel the gratitude for that, and express that maybe directly to nature as well, to whatever beings are around us, because I see them as beings. I think would be a wonderful act to incorporate.
Well, there is reciprocity because the trees cannot survive without what we exhale,
Hmm.
and we can't inhale without the trees.
Hmm.
So there is a cycle and a circle between us. And again, I'm using the word trees, but this goes to all plants and things. And we're referring to the more than human world, which takes in the animals
Hmm.
and even what we cannot see.
Hmm.
So sometimes when we're doing a forest bathing walk, we go into the world of imagination. You know, imagine what it would be like way over there. What is happening way over there? To spend some time just in your imagination, or looking at maybe a stream or a river, and imagine what it would be like if you were that leaf floating on the river. Where would you go? So
Mm.
that's almost like an extra sense. But one sense I haven't touched on is the sense of taste. How do you use taste in the forest? Well, you can taste the wind, you can taste humidity. Sometimes you just taste the air. But one thing that is a lovely way to kind of bring ourselves back to groundedness and everyday life is to end it with a tea ceremony or a
Oh.
tea gathering. The forest offers a lot of things to make tea. And so you can the guide will find maybe a plantain leaf, maybe some dandelion, flower, leaf, root, and we always bring hot water, teapot, cups, and make something at the end. I don't always find what I'm looking for here, so I try to buy boxes of tea bags, and I'll buy whatever's in season. And on my next walk, which is in another week, there's a lot of clover out there, so I bought red clover, and we'll be
Mm.
having red clover tea at the end. We had white oak tea at my last one, and they all have medicinal properties to them, and so I'll explain that. But most of all, we offer our first cup of tea to the land
Mm.
because we spent time on the land. And there have been many that have come before us and tended that land before we ever stepped on it. And we want to honor who has been there, the native peoples that were
Mm.
there, the people that tend it today. So that's our way to honor and then celebrate together
Mm.
and share our final sharing as we take in the tea, which is tasting part of the forest. But it's also a way to reground yourself and bring yourself back from that relaxed feeling so that you can drive home.
Mhm, mhm. What a beautiful way to end. And I love that it's things that you can find right there or and that are in season. Like the intentionality around that is really beautiful. And yes, I can see that being very grounding. What a lovely way to finish up. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You had asked earlier, what was I doing to incorporate nature? And one of the things I did back in 2007 was I went to a place in all places of New York City called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, where we studied nutrition through Eastern and Western
Mm,
ways of balancing, your body. But one of the things I'll always remember is that they talked about what you eat becomes who you are. And that stayed with me because I used to give tours at like Whole Foods Market and things to my groups of people that signed up for the health coaching. And when we got to the section with all the greens, I would always say, if you can't be in the forest, you're taking in the forest by eating these dark green things: kale, collards, broccoli, bok choy. They become part of you. So that again is another way to entrain with nature.
hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point you're making. Like it becomes so it's another way to um, take care of our health, take care of our bodies, and benefit from all nature has to offer to us in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And so our tea closing ceremony is a way to also take in part of the forest where we've been.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, that is lovely. Yeah, and so with do you work with herbs as well if you're doing the health coaching?
I will recommend to people Bach flower essences or
Mhm.
essential oils, foods, different ways of eating, whether it's vegan or macrobiotic or paleo or any balanced way of eating. There's no specific type for one person.
Mhm.
But I'll recommend maybe some supplements, but I don't work with herbs.
Mhm. Mhm.
They are powerful.
They sure are. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, so if there was one tip you would give people to get started on their own with forest bathing, if they felt like so inspired, they wanted to try it right now, is there any one thing that you would say to how to get started?
Yeah, go out to a place that calls to you that has nature in it, whether it's a park or a forest or your own yard, and just take the time to slowly walk and notice. Notice what is around you. If you're willing to be still, then take the time to be still. And after you're still for a little while, things will get used to you in the more than human world and they'll start to do what they would normally do if you weren't there.
Mm.
And just observe it.
Mm.
It's that gives you the benefits. Just being in the forest gives you the benefits, or being around nature, or touching a tree. And if you cannot get out because maybe you're housebound, you have plants, you have crystals, wood floors, wood tables. Nature is all around us, and we don't realize it. We think it's not, but you can do forest bathing right in your own home.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
can
that's
Yeah, you can take water in a bowl and swirl your finger around it very slowly. Just watch it. Mhm.
oh, what a wonderful, yeah, wonderful reminder. It really truly is all around us. And we tend to forget when we're so partitioned off in especially in urban areas and don't necessarily see so much of it. But yes, the house plant and the water. I love the idea with the water. And That is a wonderful tip.
Yeah, you could go outside for a minute and see what can I find that calls to me from nature. There's something outside, even if you're in the middle of Manhattan.
Mhm,
There's something, whether it's something popping up through the cracks in a
mhm,
sidewalk or a leaf on a little tree on the parkway. There's something, or a rock or stone, and bring it in and spend time with it. You'll learn a lot from it if you just spend time with it.
mhm. Yeah, that is so true. I had it reminded me of an experience I had a few months ago when I went out into my little forest. Like I said, I live right in the forest, so we have a lot of trails here. And I was out one morning and just had an interaction with a snail. It was the loveliest morning. We just had a really long, it felt very reciprocal and very like relational. It was very, very fascinating how it kind of came up from a distance away. It kind of very slowly came up to me and it actually was going a different direction and then it stopped and it turned and it came over to me. And
It
then
noticed you, didn't it?
it did. It did. It was really interesting to sort of I'm like, "Oh, that it seems like it's actually intentionally coming over."
Mhm.
And like it climbed up my shoe and up onto my leg and I just it was so beautiful. And in it me watching it, there were a number of things that I became aware of. Like one of them was slowing down, which is something I
Mhm.
find hard to do at times. And um just such a wonderful and beautiful exchange. And then there was a very definite sort of end to the interaction. It was so fascinating, like a snail. Then eventually there was just a moment, and then it turned around, it climbed back off of me and moved on and was on its little merry way. It was hilarious. It's such a beautiful, beautiful connection.
That's a wonderful experience. And you said a snail and you needed to slow down.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. It was so perfect, so perfect. So yeah, I love the tips you gave. They are so, so wonderful. If you have an opportunity and you want to get started, now you know how. You have ideas here, and just go and do it. One more thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, I think, in a different conversation, is that your spirituality is very important to you. I'm wondering if there's connection for you between spirituality and being out in nature.
Yeah, there is a connection for me because when I go out there, it's always a big reminder that I'm just a small drop in the ocean and that, the power of nature can be felt. And I think there's so many times for many of us that we feel like we are in charge of whatever's happening and we're not.
Hmm.
And so, and to watch nature, to just sit back and spend time there and hear the sounds and notice what the birds do, or just acknowledge the seasons and the new shoots coming up, or seeing on a dead log the mushrooms growing. It's just amazing to know. It for me, it touches my heart and brings me to this place of connection to something greater than myself.
Mm,
It's a
yeah,
beautiful reminder.
yeah, the connection, feeling a part of something
Mhm.
larger.
And
Yeah.
that there's harmony in the world.
Mm,
Basically, when I'm there, I'm reminded that there's really peace. That the world is really made of peace
mhm,
and that it always goes back to it. So there might be times when there's storms and nature, bends and folds and breaks. And
mhm.
then after the storm, it rebuilds itself over and over again. And what a good reminder to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and as we were about to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to touch on that we didn't get to talk about, you feel it's important to mention?
I think we covered all of it. Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, I am so grateful that you made the time to be here today. I know you also have a lot going on, and I super appreciate you being here and sharing what you've learned and observed. And I think it's wonderful. Tips for were in there for people to incorporate today if they wanted to. And yeah, thank you.